Little short story on how I got here. I came to the back room for hair and makeup. They hit me with the makeup, but wouldn't give me any hair. And then when they were all done, they said I was dull because of the makeup. No, okay, so let's go to the topic at hand. Remote assessments, data centers, and data. And it's hard to see who's in the room, but anybody in the room that's done remote assessments knows that we have some difficulty out there. There's all kinds of things that we can do for data centers and data and assessments. We're going to talk about the various types. You own the data center and a remote assessment. That one's pretty easy. We won't spend a lot of time on it. The second one, you lease the data center, so it's a colo to you, and it's just managed, and you manage all the racks. You're responsible for everything but the physical building. A little more difficult remotely, but not insurmountable. You only use a colo, and the colo has some very specific rules, like no cameras, no phones on the floor, other than by their staff. A little more difficulties. You go to a lights out or a cloud-based. How many of the people in the room here have actually been in an AWS or Azure data center when you were not doing the AWS or Azure assessment? I'd like to see a show of hands, because I've tried many times, and what I get is, no way, not in this lifetime, and what have you been smoking today? But we still have to do the assessments. And assessments are based on what we see. When you're on site, you can look at things, and you can see it, and you can feel it, you can touch it, you can smell it, you can ask questions. When you're doing it remotely, you're myopic. You're like the student pilot under the hood, where your vision is center-focused, and you don't see what's around you. We're going to talk about some stories of things I have actually in our company has actually run into when we do remote assessments and we do on-site assessments. One data center in particular went into the data center, over on the side, right near the loading dock, pallets shrink-wrapped of servers being sold and shipped off that day to Latin and South America. In my infinite wisdom and curiosity, I asked just one little specific question, because the drives were all in the servers. Has anybody wiped the data? Yeah, you got it. They hadn't. The person that was responsible for it was off on vacation. They shrink-wrapped it. Had I not asked a question, those servers with all their data would have been shipped off down to Brazil that afternoon. The truck was in the parking lot ready for the pickup. Now, that's something I saw because I was on site. When you do a remote assessment of a data center, how many of you actually go and look at the loading dock? Or have somebody go to look at the loading dock with the camera for you? Probably none. Until you get tripped up like I did, and now it's on my checklist. Data and data centers. What is data? Where is it? How can you find it? When we're physically on site, you'll look and you'll see the CD. You'll see the old tapes. You'll see the DLT tape library sitting over the side when we're dealing with old mainframes or 400s or HP nonstops or some of the highly used but lesser known technologies. You'll see the thumb drives laying around. You'll see all the load CDs. You'll see unlabeled CDs, unlabeled tapes. You'll see a whole slew of brand new drives sitting there. And then you'll see what they say are obsolete and broken drives. That is all potential data. When you're physically there, you can see it. When you're remotely there, did you ask somebody who is giving you the ability to see remotely, show me? What do you see? Or are you that person in that myopic view of the world? What do you see on the page right now? You see shoes, lots of shoes, different colors. Are they all in pairs? That's an interesting question. The observation is no, they're not. They appear to be, but when you really drill down to it, some of them are paired, some are not. And then it's why in the heck is this idiot up here showing me shoes when we're talking about data and data centers? Well, sometimes what you see, you don't really see. You see that wire hanging down? That's a data cable. Why in a shoe store in racks do I have a data cable hanging out of a ceiling? Equate that to your remote viewing, that you see a cable hanging down at the top of a rack out of a cable tray or hanging loose in a rack. Why? Technically, everything is supposed to be end-to-end connected, protected, plugged in, ready to go. Nope, it's just hanging out of the ceiling. My curiosity, if I were on site at that place, I'd raise the ceiling towel. I'd look to see what's really connected there. Is there an access point up there? Is there a sniffer up there? Is there another server hidden up there? Who knows? You don't know if you don't ask. Remote assessments are doable, but your curiosity has to go to the maximum. And you cannot be in a hurry. The person walking around with the iPad or the camera or the phone or whatever you're using to show you things, if it is permitted. And we'll get if it's not permitted, how we do it in a moment. You have to run with that. Let's look at this. This is a typical rack in a data center. That's what you're seeing on the camera. Does anybody see a problem with this? There's one horrendously large problem with the way the picture is right now. Yeah, Mark's starting to catch on to it. He's turned his head. It's upside down. It was inverted and put in the rack. So why? Why would they be doing that? Why are you getting that picture that way? Does it even impact your assessment? Probably not. But the fact that you didn't even notice that it was upside down tells me and raises your curiosity. What am I seeing? Am I really viewing? What you see is what you get. The quality of your assessment is based on what now you're asking that person that's giving you that remote view to show you. When you're there, when I walk a data center, I walk the back of all the cabinets before I walk the front. Why? Because I want to see all these little boxes, all these little modems, all of these little shared drives, all of these little hard drives that are plugged in, all these little ancillary devices that are hooked up anywhere, on why they're there. And I'm going to look for the labels for the owners. There's nothing labeled in this picture, by the way. This data center was one that we looked at for PCI, and there was nothing in it in label. Is now labeled. Pitfalls, real world. RAID racks, cages. When you go and you do an on-site, you typically walk in, you're permitted in, you do your intro, you get your visitor's badge, you're in the reception area, you go through the man trap, and it's fun to deal with man traps. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You get through the man trap, you get to the raised floor area, you get to your cage, your room, your rack, whatever it is. And then you need the key to open down at the cage level. Where did those keys come from when you're doing it remotely? Did you ask at the very beginning to show the person who was walking you to your cage, where did they get the key? Where's the key log? All those things you would normally do in person, you don't want to embarrass them by asking, show me. Remote is all about show me, show and tell. Be that obnoxious little 4-year-old that says, why? And you can't say, because, or I'll drown you. You can't do it. It's not fun. You have to be that person asking those questions. On the keys, where's the log for the keys? Can they take the keys off premise? Why would that even be a factor? Take the keys off premise, you duplicate them. Now I don't need to go into the rack to get the key out, to charge it out, to get to your secured area. I do it on my own. Are there cameras? Where is the output from those cameras? Can you view it? Can they show that to you remotely? Ask them for the last picture they can show, and show it to you. So they have to turn their little phone or their iPad at the viewing screen, and you get to see it. Where are their checklists? And where is your checklist if you're going to do one remotely? Have you built for yourself yet? And we'll take the most simplest, even for your own, the company's own, the client's own data center, a checklist when you're doing it remotely of everything you want to see, touch, smell, feel, and play with. If you don't, you're probably going to miss something. Because the person with the camera is there and assisting you that's showing these things, and I say camera, iPad, iPhone, laptop, video screen, cameras like we're using here today, anything of that nature. You've got to live with it. It's cumbersome, they don't feel well. And if, by the way, the data center's a SCIF. We ran into that recently. For those of you who are not familiar with the term SCIF, basically no emanations of any form can come outside the room. So what does that mean? Cell phones aren't going to work. Internet doesn't work. Everything's constrained to the room. So now how do we do show me? Interesting concept. The way you do it is they have to take the pictures. You have to review the pictures. After you get them, you're probably going to have to do multiple iterations, so you have to queue the people up in advance. If not, you're going to fail. Failure is not an option here. You have got to stay on top of it. No cameras permitted. Okay, this is interesting. If no cameras are permitted, how do you get to see anything? So you've got to solve that before you even set up the process. They may not let anybody but the guard or the manager in with a camera, so you've got to prearrange all of that. A data center I was at last year for a very prominent, large retailer. The data center manager was remote. The server managers were all remote. I physically went on site to do it. Good for me, I was actually able to go see one. And the only person that could get me on the raised floor was the gentleman that was in charge of workstations. Now, I can tell you when you ask somebody in charge of a workstation on where the hard drive for the workstation is and what a hard drive for a workstation is, they got it nailed. They know what it is. They'll show you everyone in the room everywhere. But when you ask them where the DLT tapes are, they stand there and they go, huh? What language you speaking there, sir? Was in the South. I'm from the South. By the way, if you haven't noticed, the only language I speak in is redneck. So if I tend to leave out connecting words, I apologize in advance. It's the nature of my beast. And those of you that know me well enough that have had me write something for you, I also write in redneck. It's all nouns and verbs. Everything else is wasted energy. But you've got to see, you've got to evaluate, you've got to pre-work it. On-sites. We talked about it. This is an on-site that actually happened in Florida. I won't name the company. Those of you that are familiar with it will know who it is. But they had a service provider go on-site into their data center to refresh hardware, turn them loose. They had clusters, three servers in cluster for every one of their key servers. About 90 days after that occurred, they started losing data that was being sold on the black market in the world. This is healthcare and card data. And they couldn't figure out why. They went into their data center, and the service provider that delivered also took out one server out of every cluster, walked out with it off the floor, and nobody ever detected it. So security monitoring, things of that nature. Why do I raise that up for remotely? Where is your monitor? How do you know that that server is the server that's supposed to be there? Where's your inventory? Where's your checklist? Where are your key principles to things? You've got to be curious, really curious. Sometimes you have to be a little obnoxious. For me, that's pretty easy. My wife is in here somewhere. She will tell you that right off the bat. I could be a very obnoxious person at times. No, you're not allowed to say all the time. Okay, remote assessments, cloud, less the cloud. You're only seeing what they choose to show you. That is the key one of the key takeaways from this. You have to ask to see everything all the way around, not just the rack, the racks, the front side, the back side, the walls, the storage rooms, particularly for obsolete and broken equipment, and where they're doing and how they're managing that. We have no problem doing it when we're on site. Those same steps must be taken in a remote manner. Colos. If they're not PCI compliant, and a lot of colos are not PCI compliant. IBM, which is now Kyndryl, 80% of them around the world are non-PCI compliant by their own doing, but have PCI customers within them. So they now become, in their operations, part of the assessment of the individual company. With that now, as part of your remote assessment, you have to cover all of those other ancillary things other than just looking at the data center physical side of it. So requirement 9, that falls in, and all of the other controls that fall down walk into play. Ping, power, and pipe. Data centers that only give ping, power, and pipe, they're pretty clear. That's requirement 9 mostly. A little bit in 12, TRAs will cover it. Things like that. You have to ask about all of that when you're doing them remotely. And are they only doing ping, power, and pipe? Ask the guys that they're working for, and 90% of the time they'll tell you, well, they're only doing ping, power, and pipe, and if we ask them, they'll throw the power switch. That's power cycling. That's more than ping, power, and pipe. Where is that in your checklist and your responsibility matrices? Contracted outsourcers and third parties to service providers of third-party service providers, and we build the daisy chain. SLAs. What type of screening are they doing when you make them part of your assessment? All of those items that you would normally not consider when they are compliant, or even if they are non-compliant and you're doing it on site, you have to keep in mind. Penetration testing. Cloud in particular with pen testing. Which of you have been successful in being able to pen test the hypervisor for Azure? I doubt anyone unless you're doing the Azure assessment. And then you probably aren't going to be allowed to pen test the hypervisor. Unless they've changed the rules, that's off limits. You've got to deal with those types of things. The cloud. The cloud. Everybody loves the cloud. Frankly, the cloud is just somebody else's computer that processes generally the commands on the back plane, the data manipulation on the front plane. For those of you that got gray hair like me, what is that? That's a mainframe. They're doing it with servers, they're doing it with mainframes, they're doing everything. But it's somebody else's computer. It still needs to be assessed. Where and how? Hopefully you get them and all of your providers are PCI compliant. You take that, you accept that, you do your spot checks if you choose to do so to validate it. You have your responsibility matrices now with the 4.0, along with the AOC. You understand what parts you're doing, you validate them, and you're off and running. If not, it's part of your body of work. Conclusions. Remote assessments and data identification are easy. If you are curious, if you're in a rush, or they're in a rush, you're going to miss the obvious pieces. You're going to miss that rack. Actually, we're 5 pallets of servers ready to go. You're going to miss the disposal and the drums that are holding the loose hard drives and the inventory on them, and if the process has been there. On solid-state drives, how do you destroy a solid-state drive, and what's the process in today's world? Shred it. That's the most likely way to do it. But where is that evidence of that being done? When you're doing it remotely, you need all of those bits, parts, and pieces. So be curious, have fun, and enjoy. Thank you very much.